Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Kelly Green Hour as we are into day 4 of free agency, technically. Day 2 of official free agency of the National Football League, and the Philadelphia Eagles have made a couple of moves. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, happy belated birthday, bud. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much. Besides my laptop and continued technical difficulties, which I am shopping for a new laptop, this will be rectified very, very quickly because tonight was terribly frustrating. It took about 40 minutes for it to do an update and actually get me into our recording studio. So
Crap happens. Before we before we jump into what we want to discuss, as always, follow us on Twitter, Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter, Connor10. Follow me on Twitter, LJ54, and follow the Eagles Pinpoll Network on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts at Eagles Pinpoll Network. And if you're joining us now live, let us know your thoughts on free agency thus far. Tariq Woolen is the big free agency pickup. They've made some re-signings, a contract extension to Jordan Davis. Ryan and I came on after that happened on Sunday, and did about a half an hour kind of talking about leading up to free agency and the Jordan Davis signing. Braden Mann got re-signed today, 4 years, $14 million, $7 million guaranteed. Best punter, probably one of the best punters in Eagles history. One of the best punters in the NFL. I think he was like 5th in average last year. He was so key in flipping the field for the Eagles. They re-signed Grant Calcaterra. They signed Johnny Munt from the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Grant Calcaterra thing I'll never understand. It's almost like them always bringing in Matt Pryor back, who won't be back because he signed with the Cardinals, or is that Toth that signed with the Cardinals? One of them signed with the Cardinals, and then the other one signed elsewhere. Obviously, the Eagles lost a bunch of people. Jalen Phillips signed a monster whopping $30 million per year contract with the Carolina Panthers. The Reed Blankenship, who I'm not a big fan of, so I'm not upset about this one, signed with the Houston Texans. The big one that I'm upset about, Nakobe Dean signing with the Las Vegas Raiders. That one hurt the most. And then news came out yesterday from Vic Fangio, kind of let it slip, that Jahad Campbell has a shoulder injury, might miss most of the offseason workouts. There's a video that the Eagles put out of Tariq Woolen going through the complex, and Jahad Campbell was there, wasn't wearing a sling. So who knows? Who knows if he how injured he really is? We'll see. Obviously, Jalen Carter had procedures and he wasn't able to really do much lifting for a couple of a couple of weeks, whatever it was, when he was out. Trying to go through this quickly, so if I'm missing anything, Jalen Carter's probably going to get a contract extension. Still waiting the AJ Brown resolution. I'm going to say this until I turn blue. Keep AJ Brown. I would not trade AJ Brown. I would keep him at least going into the season. And who knows what happens in the season with this offense? Maybe he loves the offense. Jalen gets going. His numbers go. They keep winning games and he stays. Or we get to the trade deadline and the offense isn't doing well. He's not getting his numbers, and they trade him at the trade deadline. But right now, obviously, I'm keeping him even past June 1st. Hopefully, he shows up to minicamp, training camp, and all that, and they kind of figure all that out. But I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff out there. Connor, what are your thoughts on everything?
I mean, Kyler Murray just signed with the Vikings, but I mean that seemed to be pretty obvious that was going to happen.
And they get him for cheap.
Of course, they get him like severely discounted.
Just like Tua going to Atlanta, they get him for cheap as well.
Yep. As far as the Eagles go, I mean, the AJ Brown saga is going to continue until he's not an Eagle. Even if he's an Eagle past June 1st into training camp into next season, the saga is going to continue on. People like Diana Rossini live and thrive off of AJ Brown, and external sources within the league and external league executives saying things about AJ Brown and playing, fantasy football with AJ Brown in his future. So this saga will continue. We'll continue to talk about it frequently. the Jordan Davis contract was a massive contract. I mean, I'm happy they got it done. You know, Howie's the one that he's probably going to reset a market, or he's going to be the one who tries to get a little bit ahead of the market. And we know that the defensive tackle market is heading otherworldly, not like edge, but it's heading to places, especially for extremely talented players like Jordan Davis. If we didn't pay him, somebody was going to pay him to a very similar tune of money. I don't think the contract details have fully come out on him, but I would also anticipate us freeing up about 8.8 to $6 to $8 million in cap space with that deal as well, because he was on a fully guaranteed fifth-year team option. What else did you hit on there? Reed Blankenship. So Reed Blankenship, I'm not upset about. I think some of the rhetoric around Reed Blankenship has gotten a little aggressive on social media, in that he sucked, he was terrible, blah blah blah. A lot of people went from one extreme to the other with Reed Blankenship. We were Reed Blankenship critics. We just felt they can get better and they can do better at the safety position. But there's things he did well. He was a stabilizing force in the defense, but there's things that at the end of the day, you can improve on at the safety position, and you don't have to go out and play Reed Blankenship. What was it? $8.25 million. So Howie probably would have had to have been in the $9 million range to get Reed Blankenship back. And that was just more than I probably would have been willing to pay as well. Jalen Phillips' contract never would have went that high. I'm glad Howie did not try to compete with that contract. That contract was on an absolutely absurd level. And then you look at like the Trey Hendrickson deal that ended up happening, who I would have taken Hendrickson over Phillips. Jonathan Greenard at the price he may be at is definitely someone I'd take over Jalen Phillips. And it's no disrespect to Jalen Phillips. You got to go and get your bag when you got the opportunity to get your bag, especially with the injury history that Jalen Phillips has. But I mean, the edge market's just on another level. And, I think that Howie probably had a number, probably 25 million is what I suspect that number was. And if the market got above that, which I feel like Phillips went back to Carolina, said, hey, they're going to give me 25. What will you give me? And that's what pushed them to the 30 million mark, and the fact that they had money to spend. But
I mean, and they also missed out. They also missed out on Milton Williams last year.
Yep.
And they didn't want to miss out on their primary target this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then the Dean one hurt, but it hurt a little less knowing that the Cowboys were really aggressive and may have made a better offer, and he picked the Raiders. He went with his heart, he went with his gut, and he said his gut, but I think he went with his heart and knew he couldn't go to the Dallas Cowboys. So I was pretty happy to hear that had happened. And I'm kind of surprised Christian Parker hasn't really gotten his hands on any former Eagles defensive players, and that could be that Jerry's just cheap.
Well, yeah, that, and we should remember that Ronell Williams is the linebacker coach in Vegas, and he was with the Eagles last year. So, and he was in that room with N'Kobe. So that, I mean, maybe he probably has a more of a relationship with Ronell Williams than he did Christian Parker.
And I think that the speculation definitely started to swirl when Ronell Williams went to Vegas, that maybe Vegas would make a run at him because they have so much money. They have a huge hole at linebacker. So
Speaking of Ronell Williams, we went to the same college. I covered him. He was one of the best linebackers in Westchester University history, and I got to cover him when I was doing radio and newspaper stuff. So that's my little claim to fame right there.
Fun fact: the people you know, the people you know, the people you see. Otherwise, like, I mean, those were the big ones. The Braden Mann contract, based on like the early part of free agency. You kind of knew that Braden Mann was. Yeah, you kind of knew that Braden Mann was going to have to make some money, and that's why it might have taken longer than people thought to get that deal done, because Howie was like, damn, this market got hot. So he probably had to make things a little more enticing.
The tight end market got hot early. With some of the, I mean, Njoku's still available. Dallas Goedert's available. Something tells me he'll probably sign with the Eagles tomorrow, so that they can avoid the that $20 million of dead cap. And I think, like, look, a lot of people are saying the Eagles don't care about dead cap, and that might be true. But there's that right there potential of about $60 million of dead cap sitting there if you trade AJ Brown, which I would not do. If you don't re-sign Dallas Goedert, $40 million on AJ Brown if you trade him before June 1st, and $20 million on Dallas Goedert if you don't sign him. So, like, I'm still of the belief AJ Brown's going to be here. But I do think it wouldn't shock me, even if they do re-sign Dallas Goedert, which is a big possibility, they need to address the tight end position in the draft. Probably like I want Kenyon Sadiq. Like if he started dropping, if he got the 15 and started dropping, I would consider trading up for him. I don't know if he would make it to 23, but if he got picked in the top 15, top 12, whatever it is, maybe you get Stowers, or I think Rauch, the tight end from Stanford. I think that's his name. And then Ohio State, there's an Ohio State tight end coming out. So like there are some okay tight ends. Look, like if you could have a mixture of Munt and Calcaterra, that would probably be a good tight end one. But one is a good blocking tight end, the other is a good receiving tight end. You need that overall tight end, somebody that can lead the room, and they don't have that right now.
Yeah, and I think that somebody pointed out on Twitter that Mund actually has more receptions than Grant Calcaterra, and Calcaterra's 4 years in the league. And I understand that for the first 2 years, Calcaterra was almost non-existent within the offense. But since then, I think I looked at the last 2 years, and Mund almost has the same amount of reception. So, but I agree with you. The fact that they went out and got Mund, they re-signed Grant Calcaterra. Don't love the move, but I put it out on Twitter. You know, it was the most Howie move. You knew it was coming. He's somebody that they've liked. They've wanted to get more out of. They haven't been able to get more out of. So they're going to bring him back and they're going to see what happens. Even if you bring Goddard back, you still have to address it. I put a big post out on Twitter today about the frustrations that I have for everything that Howie has done right in setting this team up for success. The lack of foresight on the Lane Johnson and Dallas Goedert heirs and what was going to happen when the end of the road came with them has been a little mystifying as far as what we usually see from Howie Roseman and what Howie Roseman usually does. So, and I understand there's some people who say, you know, maybe Cam Williams is going to be the heir to Lane Johnson. Cam Williams has some developmental feats that he has to reach before I think he's going to be a starting right tackle. And I don't know if there's necessarily the time to ensure those feats are reached before he's going to have to be thrust into game action. Which brings us to Fred Johnson, who still hasn't re-signed or gone anywhere either, which is surprising when you think that Matt Pryor and Brett Toth got contracts, but people are still passing over Fred Johnson. That seems a bit odd to me, but I know
unless Fred Johnson has kind of like a handshake deal that the Eagles are going to re-sign him like later once they make a final decision on AJ Brown. Like, again, I get Howie is going to potentially take calls on everybody, and like his asking price, he's not going to come down off his asking price for New England. Like if somebody is willing to give you multiple first, you're going to trade AJ Brown. Like you're going to get multiple first. Yes, you will do it. But I'm not going to be like, oh, you know, we're past the draft. Okay, maybe I'll take a second next year. No, I still want a first. So like Howie's not going to quote unquote lose this trade if he were to trade AJ Brown. But I'm still of the belief that like he's going to be here, you know, and once that decision is made, whether it's this weekend, whether it's by, you know, in a couple of weeks, whether it's by draft time, whatever, like I think once they have final resolution on that and they know exactly what money they have, we'll start seeing this second, third, fourth level of guys signing, and I think Fred Johnson will be a part of that.
Yeah, and we know that's where Howie does the majority of his work is you know in the he either makes a big splash early, like we saw with the Bryce Huff circumstance and some other signings in the past, or he kind of holds out. And we kind of figured that this year he wouldn't be very active. There was some reports leading up that he wasn't going to be very active and stuff because of the salary cap circumstance, because like not Howie's not one to take whatever. I think he started free agency with about $17 million. He is not the type that's going to go from 17 million to 1 million in one day. He's not, and he has more restructures. He has more extensions to work with. There's a lot of work to be done that, you know, I just don't think that Howie sees the needs to the extent that the fans do. And that's become an overarching theme and reality to what every single free agency and draft cycle that we have gone through over the past 7-8 years that we've been doing this, LJ, is that there's the need that Howie feels and the forward thinking that Howie does to address specific future needs. And then there's what the fans want and what the fans think and what the fans need or feel they need on this Eagles roster. So I'm not trying to, throw too much cloud on Howie Roseman and bragging that he's the best and he can't do wrong. He's definitely done wrong, but how he sees things versus how fans see things are very different, and it's been always very clear since Howie was running this.
Another former Eagle just got signed. Kylan Granson got signed by the Tennessee Titans to a 1 year.
Wow. Kylan Grant. Well, you knew Kylan Grant wasn't coming back. That was a pretty easy one to
we didn't think
predict leaving.
We didn't think Grant Calcaterra was, and he's back. So
I did what on our Stare Go episode. I said go, but there was always that thought in my mind. Calcaterra is one of those guys. Felt like Kenny Gainwell. Feels like a guy that the Eagles really like and want to give an opportunity to, and really want to keep around because they see something in him, and it may never come to fruition. Usually doesn't come to fruition when they pick a favorite that was drafted in like the 6th round, like Grant Calcaterra was. So, I mean, ultimately, Calcaterra, I hope the contract's set up that they can get out from under him because by the start of the season, because I do think Mund is good to keep. You need that. We missed a blocking specialist last year majorly. We also didn't really use Cameron Latu enough to know, was he going to be the blocking specialist, or could he have been more of a blocking specialist? But ultimately, I do think that they address tight end a couple more times, whether that be Reese bringing back Dallas Goedert. What they have to draft at least one. There's no way you come out of this draft and not bring at least one into the building and make that room more competitive, because Dallas Goedert shouldn't be comfortable because he's possibly, even if he resigns, going back to the well next season as a free agent. Grant Calcaterra shouldn't feel comfortable with anything. The only one who should be comfortable at this point is Mund, and the only reason is because we absolutely need a blocking specialist in the room. It was so missed when Dallas Goedert went down, and Goedert wasn't even great blocking this past year, but to have a guy who can block and catch a ball when called upon in those rare circumstances is definitely a benefit for the Eagles, and his experience, I think, might help it in a room that's going to probably get a lot younger.
I will say this about you were mentioning how we didn't go on a spending spree early, and we didn't do that last year as well, but like, you have to think about it. We've re-signed Jordan Davis. We're going to re-sign Jalen Carter. We're going to extend Jalen Carter, extend Quinyon Mitchell, extend Cooper DeJean, and I think, next year and the year after, they're going to have cap room to do more moves. And then 2029, like when they get the new TV deal, so in 5 years, the cap went from 200 million to 300 million. By 2030, the cap could be $400 million. So like, if Howie is still doing this, because I mean, he's got a lifetime contract with the Eagles as it is, but like, who knows? In a couple of years, he may want to venture into some other field, not another team, but another field. Like, but as long as he's doing this, Howie's always going to be able to find a way to keep teams, or to keep the Eagles competitive, and whatnot. Like, so I wouldn't be too worried about like them not going, after. They tried to get Trey Hendrickson. They called about Max Crosby. They were making, there were reports that they were making calls on people. So like, there's a number, obviously. Like, they're not good. It would have been tough if they were to, get Trey Hendrickson got 28 million, I think, from the Ravens, if I'm not mistaken. Say the Eagles went to 28 million with him. Like, that'd have been 28 million for Hendrickson, 26 million for Jordan Davis. Jalen Carter is going to get $30 million. And like, while it's going to be a lot, like, obviously we know the focus, at least where the money is we've seen this progressive switch. It's slowly but surely going to switch from the offense to the defense. Offensively, how much longer, does Saquon have? How much longer will AJ be here? How many more years does Lane Johnson have? Landon Dickerson just restructured his contract, made it a 2-year deal. He could retire after this because there was all the talk of him retiring this year. Jordan Mailata is making big money. Cam Jurgens is making big money. So like you kind of have to. I'm still of the belief that like it's so easy to manipulate the salary cap. Like Miami, who's taking a $99 million dead cap hit because of releasing Tua, was still out there signing players. So like, let's be real. Dallas came into this with the least amount of money to spend. They were in negative like $20 to $30 million range, still signing players and making trades. So that's why like while the salary cap is there, I feel like it's a fictitious thing, and you can always manipulate it, and that's what Howie is really good at doing.
A former Eagle who I was kind of hoping a reunion would happen with has signed with the Buffalo Bills, CJ Gardner-Johnson. So that was I know that was one a lot of people were holding out hope for, but he's headed to Buffalo. So that kind of sucks the air out of that for Eagles fans.
I wanted CJ. We need a safety. I wanted CJ to come back. So it wouldn't surprise me. Obviously they're going to draft somebody, but I'm thinking maybe Jaquan Brisker could be somebody that the Eagles look to bring in. I do think that though Marcus Epps is going to resign just to bring depth. We know that Makuba is going to be the starting one safety. Sidney Brown cannot be on the field. He shouldn't even be on the team if we're being serious. But they're going to have to. And they brought Michael Carter back on a restructured 1-year deal. I wonder if they're going to give him an opportunity to potentially earn a starting spot at safety.
Well, yeah, you have to expect, like, there was this weight on Michael Carter, and everyone was like, it's the most obvious release ever. Why hasn't Howie done it yet? And they clearly see something in Michael Carter and the fact that they went out there, they acquired him. They didn't just want to outright release him and open the door for somebody else to get him, because he wasn't going to be able to be dealt with the cap hit that he had with that option bonus that he had. There was a fully guaranteed, whatever it was, $10 million or whatever it was worth. Obviously it wasn't going to happen to how he was going to be able to do anything like that. But the fact that he released him but reworked the contract to basically ensure that he didn't see the light of day as a free agent was savvy by him, and they clearly see something in him. And like you said about Sidney Brown, I agree. Should Sidney Brown be on this roster? No. Have they kind of been backed into a corner at the safety position that he's going to continue to remain on this team? Yes. So I think that Sidney Brown's still going to be around for a while. And they like him as a special teamer. He made some had some errors in special teams as well. I think he needs to take the time to polish his game and clean up his game a little bit. And I mean, he could definitely be a viable depth option, but there's some polish to the game that definitely needs to happen. And I don't know if Sidney Brown's the type to polish his game based on how he's like a heat-seeking missile. He's kind of like Reed Blankenship. Reed Blankenship, I don't know if he's ever going to polish his game enough from a tackling perspective and a coverage perspective to be able to be someone you can lean on. What a lot of people have obviously said is DeMeco Ryans sees enough in him to bring him onto his roster. So obviously we know he's well respected. We know he can play the safety position. We know if you have a top safety, he's probably a fine, viable number 2 safety for you. But safety is definitely a need. I like you said, Epps is probably coming back. He'll be in the 3rd, 4th wave coming down the line. And I do think they should draft one and sign one through free agency and fill that room up a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if they draft, one safety and one who's got the versatility to be a safety, like maybe a linebacker, cornerback with the potential to move to safety.
I wonder if they might think about, and I wouldn't do this, I wonder if there's thought of putting Cooper DeJean back there. Like, I wouldn't do it. I love him as the slot. He's the best slot corner in football. I love him in the action. But, like, obviously, we know he can play wherever on the field. And if they aren't able to bring a safety, get a safety, whatever whatever it may be, I wonder if that's a thought for Vic Fangio. Also, when it comes to Vic, like, this has to be a hard offseason for Howie in terms of what players do you want to bring in defensively? Because how long is Vic going to be here? This is probably going to be his last year. And we know he plays a very specific type of system. And who's the defensive coordinator after they leave? If it's Jim Schwartz, he plays a totally different system. You're going to a 4-3. But if it's, I mean, Christian Parker would have been the obvious guy, but he's not here. Clint Hurt, like I don't know if he was the defensive coordinator in Seattle, and I think he was more of a 4-3 guy. So like that there's a lot of questions that Howie has to be thinking. All right, I like this guy, like Jonathan Grenard. The Eagles are you know, there's been all this talk of them, you know, calling the Vikings potential trade and extension for him if they were to make that move. Does he fit in this off defense? Does he fit in a defense, any type of defense? Because who knows what our defense is going to look like next year after Vic Fangio retires.
Yeah, he has the toughest decisions to make because you know you're suddenly gonna have to flip your tune on the edge rusher position and start chasing after some edges if you got, like you said, Jim Schwartz coming in who runs that 4-3, you know, wide 9 type of style where the edge rushers are way out on the edge and they're reliant to have that motor to go, and we've seen it before, and just the way that they play even more because like Vic Fangio plays off, but like Jim Schwartz plays off. Like his zone coverage, we spent a couple seasons yelling on post game shows about what was Jim Schwartz doing in these situations because of how off he sometimes was playing some of his defensive players and for significant portions of the game. So it's so different because then you have to evaluate talent from such a different scope and from a different lens. And obviously we know Vic Fangio, like there's a lot of big, like he restructured the contract for Landon Dickerson. It looks like Dickerson could be considering retirement after two more seasons. Then you got the Lane Johnson thing looming over your head. You know, you got Cam Jurgens. He's off getting his stem cell treatment done. What's going to happen with him? Is he going to be able to come back and be the center that you saw 2 seasons ago, or is he not going to be able to be the center of the future? There's so many question marks that are coming with some of the players from an age perspective and from an injury perspective. And, you know, like you said, Saquon Barkley earlier, AJ Brown, even if he's here this year, I'd be hard pressed to believe he makes it through next off season as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. When it's more palatable to trade him or release him and you know, draft a wide receiver and focus on getting younger on the offensive side of the ball. Because like you said, it's going to flip. You got all the money that's slowly making its move to the defensive side of the ball. So Howie's got to focus on building the offense from a similar lens, replacing Dallas Goedert, replacing Lane Johnson, preparing for life after AJ Brown, preparing for life after Saquon Barkley. So there's lots of forward thinking that Howie's going to have to do, and we may not understand or like some of the decisions that are going to be made, but this is why some of the decisions have to be made this way. There's so many moving parts from a coaching standpoint and from a player's standpoint that I don't envy Howie's job, but I trust that Howie's going to do his job and he's going to do it well and he's going to do it effectively because he's been doing it for so long to an effect of being predictive and being forward thinking and making the right decisions. And
So I do want to quickly talk about Riq Woolen, bringing him in as a CB2 behind Quinyon Mitchell with Cooper DeJean. We know the reputation that he had in Seattle. His rookie year, he had 6 interceptions, and that was with Clint Hurt as his defensive coordinator. So I think the Eagles have kind of the inside scoop, obviously, with Hurt being the defensive line coach, assistant head coach. So he knows Woolen. And obviously, you know, he hasn't been as good since his rookie year. He has a lot of penalties. I think he has more taunting penalties, I think, than like than any other team in the NFL. Like that's how undisciplined he's been. A lot of people have kind of compared him to CJ Darius Slay, our big play Slay. Not like, you know, just the swag he has. And I think, you know, that's the one thing one of the reasons I want a CJ back. Like the swag. I know the defense is good, but I want somebody like that has swagger that's gonna, you know, bring the energy, bring the attitude. And I think Tariq Woolen can do that. And look, we had Adoree Jackson last year. And look, Adoree Jackson did his job, did it the way we wanted to. But the one thing the Eagles didn't really do is pick off the ball a lot, especially in the secondary. You know, Bowen had interceptions. Jalen Carter had a pick 6 against Minnesota. I was at that game. But like the secondary itself didn't really have many interceptions, and that's something that Woolen can do. And I think having that trio of cornerbacks, like Woolen was a number 1 corner with Seattle before he kind of got demoted, lost his job to Josh Jobe, and then he really didn't fit in with Mike McDonald's defensive scheme. But I think in this scheme, like you can flip them on any side of it, flip both him and Q on any side of the field. Q, like, and Q and Woolen are there. Like Q is quiet. He's the silent assassin. And Woolen's going to speak his mind. You get him in trouble sometimes. You saw in the NFC Championship game against the Rams. But he still can go out there and ball. And I think like having those 3 back there, you could put them anywhere on the field, cover any type of receiver. If you want Q to travel with CeeDee Lamb, you can put Woolen on Pickens or whoever's in the slot will have to go up against DeJean. Like I think having those 3, that could help the pass rush too. While we really have no edges right now, we have Hunt and Smith, and that's it. That's it. Literally the only 2 edges that we have on the team. I think that they can help the edges and should help the defense. And I like having that trio of cornerbacks. Might be the best trio of cornerbacks in football.
I know there's a lot of people anointing it already that way, and I would agree. Like Tariq, well, I think it was there's a stat out there that Woolen and Q in man coverage. I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but they ranked 1 and 2 side by side. I don't know if it was yards per route run or yards per target, or there was some statistic that Woolen was 0.5 and Q was 0.6, and they were 1 and 2 in all of the NFL, and it had something to do with man coverage. So obviously, and it helps it like even in a zone heavier scheme that you have guys that you can really trust and rely on to just man up and play. And there are people who are kind of speculating, what about like moving DeJean inside out sometimes, interchanging with Woolen, because Woolen's got more length than DeJean and has been known and seen to cover tight ends with a pretty strong degree of success. So it'll be interesting to see. That's just, more interchangeable pieces for Vic to work with. And we know that Vic loves versatility. He loves the ability to interchange and intermingle pieces. And that might make DeJean more disposable to even move out to the safety position as well from time to time. So it'll be, again, makes things a little bit tougher for Howie, because he's got to forward think a little bit this isn't going to be the same scheme, or it's unlikely to be the same scheme going forward. But who are guys with the versatility to do similar or better between the transition from a 3-4 to a 4-3. But we can't deny the value. Like Vic Fangio said it best when he made that comment last night, that it feels like they're the farm system for the rest of the NFL, because every year they either internally develop guys that they drafted, or they get these guys in on prove it deals or underperforming guys who then earn themselves a way out of Philadelphia and to get some money because Philadelphia is not able to pay them. And you mentioned the whole edge situation. I agree with you. I think the best came out of Smith and Hunt when Phillips was there. So it's going to be vital that they should draft an edge. I agree as well, but it's vital that they get another veteran edge presence in the building, because it helped so much when Phillips arrived. I know that Smith was injured for 6 or 7 weeks prior to that too, but even the first 3 weeks of the season for Smith, there wasn't a whole lot showing compared to the expectation that we had based on the prior season and how we had wrapped up the season prior. So I think it's vital that they draft an edge, and then they definitely get a veteran presence in the building. And part of me is really feeling like the amount of talk about Greenard and the amount of reporting around Greenard, it just feels like it's a near foregone conclusion that once Howie's exhausted his free agent resources and he has to sink into his draft capital, that's when he's going to make that decision to go more aggressively at Greenard.
There's a lot of talk about Greenard. I feel like even behind the scenes, he's probably like, if Howie's gonna make a big move, it's gonna be for an edge. And like everybody's talking about Jonathan Greenard and Minnesota and all this. Boy, it wouldn't shock me if like in a week Eagles trade for Max Crosby. Like it won't. Like could his price come down enough to where Howie could swing? You know, obviously they're not going to get 2 1s like Baltimore is going to give up. Could he swing at 2 2s? You know, something like that. Like I feel like because everybody's focused on Jonathan Grenard, that Howie has something else up his sleeve that nobody's talking about because he moves in the shadows.
And someone even and people have even mentioned the prospect of maybe what if you do 2 2s and make one of them this year, one of them next year, and the one next year possible to become a 1 based on conditions. Like I feel like that's the best chance the Raiders are going to have at this point is to take 2s with the condition that they can become 1s dependent upon playing time incentives or sack incentives or similar to the Hassan Reddick move that was made by Howie Roseman that had the incentives laced to it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, it kind of seems like the Raiders are at a point where they're totally fine keeping him. They spent all that money. They built a roster that looks viable to perform on a level superior to last year's roster. So now maybe they're like, fine, we'll keep Max Crosby. We can make the financials work. And until someone comes forward, similar to Howie with AJ Brown, until someone comes forward and makes the offer that we know he's worth, then we're not going to give him up. So I can see that like that Howie's going to probably, especially leading closer to the draft, teams may press a bit more on the Crosby possibility again. But I wouldn't be surprised if Howie's still there, calling, texting, hey there.
And I think
what's his name, John Spytek, like, hey, you know, you want to do some business? I'm still here.
Close. Wasn't Spytek in? I feel like him and.
They had some sort of connection of working together in the past. So exactly, I mean, I could see it happen. You never know, but you know, edges definitely becomes a major priority, but there's a few future priorities that Howie's probably going to ultimately end up putting more value on than maybe an edge rusher. And he knows like a guy like Grenard's out there. He knows there's some other vets out there that he might be able to get into the building and things can be hopefully okay circumstantially. So we'll see what happens on the edge market, but
and again the safety market. I'm Brisker maybe. We talked about Epps.
So it feels like Brisker. I think that it's been reported Brisker's values right around $6 to $8 million. I just saw CJGJ got $6 million. I don't know if that was max $6 million with some incentives. I'm not sure, but I mean the fact that I don't know if Howie's waiting for the edge market to continue to soften, but I mean, Jaquan Brisker at $6 million or CJGJ at $6 million with potentially some of that being incentive money. It feels like something I'd be jumping all over if I was Howie. So he must have something in mind where he's of the belief in discussions and seeing what Reed Blankenship went for. Maybe he's of the belief that there's more softening of the market to come and he'll pounce when the time's right. We know that that's probably the mindset that he's operating with, but you don't want to let them all get away because Makuba's young. Like you don't want to have 2 rookie safeties back there, man. Well, Makuba's not a rookie, but I mean, he didn't even complete the full season because of the injury and stuff. So you don't want 2 really, really young safeties back there, man, in that safety position in such a complex defense like Vic Fangio's. It would help to have a veteran presence who's able to coach up those young safeties and maybe make it a strength in the future for us.
Yep. Thanks for joining us, little G. Happy early birthday to you, bud. Charger, thank you for joining us. He'd like to see Rasheed Walker from Green Bay. I think if they bring an offensive tackle in, it's going to be Fred Johnson. I don't think it would be Rasheed Walker. Plus, like, there's a chance at 23 they could take a Caden Proctor. But again, they like Cam Williams. They also have Hinton that they drafted last year. So they have bodies.
And I think
and we don't know. Again, we don't know what type of offensive lineman Mannion and Cooper want. It's different than Stoutland.
Exactly. That was the point I was about to make. Is we don't know what they prefer in an offensive lineman. We don't know. We kind of have a rough idea of where we think this offense is going to go schematically wise, but they're going to have their certain perspective on specific offensive linemen. And Cam Williams, while he was brought in for the last offensive regime, whatever you want to say about them, or for the Nick Sirianni offense, is Cam Williams going to be the fit for this offense with Sean Mannion, or is that not going to be viable? And is Sean Mannion still going to be here next year, like, or the year after? Like, there's so many things that you have to consider in this circumstance with Lane Johnson's retirement. But I mean, with how young they got, I mean, I feel like on the offensive coaching staff side, they've at least insulated themselves well. That if Mannion gets a job elsewhere, like, it feels like Howie and them have prepared themselves a lot. Three of the people that they had interviewed for offensive coaching jobs are now on their offensive staff.
Lazard and Johnson, yeah.
Yeah, Grizzard and Johnson. So it's kind of like they kind of prepared for, you know what? They're not going to poach everybody off our staff. We're going to be able to promote one of these guys, or Mannion might become a head coach.
Yeah, I'm also of the belief that if the offense, becomes top 5 in the NFL, goes from what was it, 29th passing and, whatnot, and they you
Mannion, fire Sirianni and you promote Mannion.
I don't know if they're going to want to let Mannion go if Mannion's getting head coaching jobs and the offense is rocking. So, and I get, you bring in Grizzard and you bring in Johnson, like, to be here if that potential were to happen. But I mean, maybe Roseman and Laurie just would be tired of having to change it over and over and over again. And like, all right, you know what? We'll just make Mannion head coach, and Mannion can run his offense and run the team. Like, I just think that all the possibilities are there, but we obviously have to see how this upcoming season goes, because it's going to be it's not going to be the easiest season. Say it right now. Like, we don't know what the schedule's like. We know, we don't know what the roster's like, but they've made the playoffs every year under Sirianni, 5 straight years. Like, it's going to be a tough season coming up. Brand new offense. Losing, like, they lost 4 defensive starters last year, more than 3 more this year, for like whatever it is. So I mean, and again, Dory Jackson's not going to come back, so like you can include that, even though Woolen's better than Jackson.
No, definitely.
So like it's a lot. It's a lot of changes that have been made on this team, and they're going to be made, especially with the money that's going to have to be paid out over the next couple of years to these defensive guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. It's going to be interesting to see how he manages through this and continues to. One more comment from Charger 7743. Brisker is another Blankenship type player, in my opinion. I guess the counter to that would be you don't have to pay him like Blankenship. You get Brisker,
but
yeah, you get Brisker at a more palatable price point than what Reed Blankenship ended up going and getting paid for. And there's no disrespect to Reed Blankenship. I just don't see him as an $8 million starting safety for the Philadelphia Eagles. Whereas Jaquan Brisker at $5 to $6 million is your veteran starter, with Makuba developing, and hopefully you draft a safety. You could look at a guy like Dylan Thieneman as one of the options, I think, out of Oregon there, who's one of the top safety prospects. You could possibly consider him as somebody who can come in and has some versatility and can play all over your defense and support as well. So it's more so the point that you can be a Reed Blankenship-like player. That's fine. We're just not, I just don't want to see him paid like Reed Blankenship.
So before we finish up, what move do you think the Eagles are going to make over, say, the next 5 to 7 days? What move would you like to see? What move do you think they're going to make? What's the next move going to be in free agency for Howie and the Eagles?
I'm holding to my Grenard comment earlier. It just feels like at this point, it feels like the obvious one. And I don't know. It's not necessarily to the belief that Howie's going to get desperate. I just think Howie knows it's good to get that type of player in the building, but he just needs to exhaust the free agent market first, or as much of the free agent market as he can, before going into his draft capital. We know that if he can save the capital, the draft capital that he so cherishes, and he has the opportunity to go out and pull that veteran edge presence off the free agent market, and it doesn't also affect the comp picks in 2027, then he's definitely going to do that. And we know that Howie likes to play that wait-in game to try and wait out the comp pick process as well, so that he continues to keep the comp picks that he has and hopes to continue to get. But I think Grenard's the next move. Something at edge is the next move. Grenard's my pick as the next like big move, but I just feel like something at edge is going to be the move. Although now seeing CJGJ go off this evening, even safety could be something that Howie's maybe starting to turn his attention towards, knowing that one of the considered top safety options is off the board in CJGJ. So, but I think it's going to be edge.
Charger says Thibodeau from the Giants. I wouldn't mind that. I just don't know if the Giants would trade him in the division. That would be interesting.
Not without pushing Howie further than Howie probably would be willing to go. I just don't see. I don't know.
I'm gonna go.
I think it's a set. I think what are they asking a second for him? Can't remember what the ask was. I think it was a second.
Top 5 pick, right?
Yeah, so you have
but
to
he
expect
definitely
that
underperformed. Mm-hmm. See, I think they're gonna re-sign Dallas Goedert tomorrow.
Yeah,
I think that's gonna happen. I know it's not the flashiest thing, but it'll at least give them a quote unquote tight end 1. For another year, but I also still think they have to draft the tight end. Like this is the year they've ignored the tight end position in the draft. Unlike when we had Ertz and we drafted Goddard in 2017, 2018, whatever it was. They have to prioritize that in this year's draft. So they'll re-sign Goddard tomorrow and then hopefully prioritize a tight end, day 2 or whatever it may be in the draft. Which, by the way, the draft is 42 days away from today. We are 6 weeks away, and we have some our mock draft episodes coming up where we do an Eagles only mock draft, the first round mock draft, and we see when it comes to the Eagles draft who can do better in terms of how many we can get. Obviously, it's hard because I don't include trades in mine because I hate doing that. I just whatever draft picks they have is what I'm going with. But obviously, Howie is the master at trading draft picks. And I think that they're definitely going to prioritize the 2027 draft over the 2026 in terms of the capital, because the 2027 draft is supposed to be better than the 2026 draft. And who knows what they want to do at
that's also
positions.
That's also the favorite stance every single draft season. So the 2028 draft is going to be the draft to be in when the 2027 draft cycle begins after the Super Bowl. I'm certain of it, but it is supposed to be like the 2026 class is supposedly was expected to be one of the weaker ones, but obviously NIL plays a massive role now in the deciding factor of if a class is going to be good or not. You don't necessarily know way in advance because you don't necessarily have these guys coming out as juniors all the time anymore. If they know that they can make a bag at college for one more season, and stuff. So it definitely shifted things for how the draft is looked at and the time frame and timeline with the draft. So.
Yep. All right. Well, the Eagles haven't done much, but they did get a starting cornerback. We'll see what happens over the next, week or so. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, probably with our first mock draft episode. Obviously, if there's some breaking news in terms of a trade or big time move, so one way or the other, we'll probably hop in and do a quick episode. But until then, thank you all for tuning into the Kelly Green Hour. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54 and follow the Eagles Pin Pull Network on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts at Eagles Pin Pull Network. Until next time, for Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour.